はい、皆様、こんばんは、スウェーデン大使館のアダム・ベイと申します。次の、ゲストの方を、ご紹介させていただきます。スウェーデンを、代表する作家の一人である、ヨン・アイヴィデ・リンクヴィストさんと、翻訳家の、ヘレン・ハルメ、ミホさんです。ヨン・アイヴィデ・リンクヴィストさんは、本当に、多作な、作家ですが、日本語に訳されているのは、残念ながら2冊、のみです。その2冊は、長編小説のモールスと、短編小説の、ボーダですね。どちらも、映画化しており、日本でも、公開されていますね。僕のエリと、ボーダ2つの世界を、ご覧になっている方が多いと思います。聞き手の、ヘレン・ハルメ・ミホさんは、世界中で、大ベストセラー、となった、スティーグ・ラーソン著ミレニアムシリーズ、など、翻訳されています。最新の、訳書は、アストリッド・リングレン著、山賊の娘、ローニャの新訳ですね。そして本日の、お話のテーマが、日常の亀裂、恐怖を描くことです。それでは、ヨンさん、ミホさん、よろしくお願いします。いらっしゃいますか？はい、ミホさん。
こんばんはですね。ありが
こん
とうござい
ばんは。
ます。
そして、Jon, har vi det här?
Det hoppas jag.
Utmärkt.
Ja.
Varsågoda.
Tack. そしたら始めますね。まず私の自己紹介からしますと、スウェーデン語の小説などを翻訳しておりますヘレン・ハルメ・ミホと申します。残念ながらこれからご一緒させていただくヨン・アイヴィデ・リンクヴィスト氏の作品を翻訳したわけではなくて、私に声がかかったのは単にヨン・アイヴィデ・リンクヴィスト氏の作品、私がすごく好きだっていうことが関係者にバレていて、でスウェーデン語で作品も読めるし、つまり日本語に訳されてない作品も読めるし、ちょうどいいんじゃないかっていうことで声がかかってっていうだけのことだったりします。なので今日はある意味読者代表のような立場でいろいろお伺いできればと思っております。で、まずご本人著者のヨン・アイヴィデ・リンクヴィスト氏の紹介を少しさせていただきたいと思います。スウェーデンのストックホルム郊外のブラッケベリというところの出身で、マジシャン、スタンドアップコメディアン、それからシナリオライターとして活躍された後に、2004年に、ちょっとこれ画面共有を試してみますね。ちょっと待ってくださいね。2004年に、フルスクリーン、これじゃない、違う。これですね。Yes, this is the right one. これが正しいやつですね。2004年に、ロードテンレッテコンマイン、逃げ切れちゃってるけど、まあいいですね。日本語で訳された時にはモールスという題名になりましたけれども、それで作家としてデビューされました。こちらが日本語版ですね。2009年に早川書房から出ています。で、原作、これを原作にスウェーデンで、僕のエリ200歳の少女として、またアメリカではモールスというタイトルで、映画化もされていて、でこちらのスウェーデン版の、映画の脚本の方はアイヴィデ・リンクヴィスト氏がご自身が書かれています。でその後、主にホラーや主にホラーの分野ですね。で、長編小説や短編、戯曲なども数多く発表されていまして、で先ほどマダマさんからお話があったように、日本語訳にされて 日本語訳されている作品は少ないんですけれども、スウェーデンでは数々の文学賞を受けたりもしている大変な人気作家のお一人で、特に2015年に、これですね、フラーレルセンっていう、日本語に訳すと動き第二の場所という意味になりますけど、こちらはまだ日本語になってませんが、純文学のイメージの強いアウグスト賞というスウェーデンの文学賞がありまして、そこにノミネートされた時には大変大きな話題を呼びました。あと日本語になっている作品としては、2006年にスウェーデンで出た、パッパシュペッガル、紙の壁という意味なんですけど、これですね。それが、ちょっと待ってくださいね。これ短編集なんですけれども、これがボーダー2つの世界という、題名で日本語訳されています。2019年です。これちょっと書影切れちゃってるんですかね。まあ、ジャブですね。で、これの表題作であるボーダーという作品が、これもご自身が脚本に関わる形で映画化されて、2018年にスウェーデンで、日本では2019年に公開されていて、カンヌ映画祭である視点賞を受賞したりしています。であと日本語に訳された作品、実は短編がもう一つありまして、スティーブン・キングほかのさまざまな作家の短編が入っているアンソロジーで、闇のシャイニング、リリアンの恐怖図書館という、本に、本当にこれ聞けちゃってるのかな、キーパーコンパニオンという短編が訳されているので、ご興味があったらぜひですね。他に本当にたくさんの作品を出されている多作な作家でいらっしゃるんですが、日本語に訳されているのはこのぐらいです。ということで、質問に入る前にご本人から今の紹介に先に言っておきたいこととか、今の紹介に何か付け加えたいこととかありましたら、ぜひ何か。
Well, I'm happy that you're here, first of all, that anyone, if anyone is out there listening to this, welcome. I'm glad that you joined. And I think I would like to add that the Japanese cover for my first novel, Morse, is, I think it's the most beautiful of all covers. It's been translated into, I think, 33 countries or something, but the Japanese one is the most beautiful one. So yeah, thanks for that, Japan.
いいですか？じゃあ質問しますね。今著者の紹介をさせていただいて、それを聞いた人の多くはまずマジシャンをされていて、その後にスタンドアップコメディアンになって、でその後にホラー小説の作家になったっていう経緯にすごく興味を惹かれて、どうしてだろうと思われると思うんですけれども、これらの共通点は何ですかね。ご自身の中ではつながってるんでしょうか。特に私が思ったのは、そのコメディの世界とホラー小説の世界が結構隔たりがあるように私には思えるんですけれども、ご自身の中ではつながっているんでしょうか。
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this quite a lot, and yeah, there is a connection because definitely because magic, which I spent a lot of my youth learning, sitting in front of a mirror, watching my hands doing, you put the coin from that hand to that hand, and then you don't do it, and it should do it. It'll look exactly the same. And writing, especially horror, is trying to learn a way to make the impossible seem possible. And magic does that too. You try to understand the techniques for the suspension of disbelief so that people can actually for a moment believe that, wow, magic exists, or the monster exists, I believe in it. And comedy also, there's more in common than the base for comedy and the base for horror is very much the same, in that you establish a recognizable environment, people you can relate to. you do that in comedy too. I mean, you must relate to the character, otherwise. Okay, so we have this situation, these people that we can relate to, and then you introduce a foreign object, whatever, the monster, the what whispers from the other side, whatever, into this community, into this reality. And then you see what happens. Like in Fawlty Towers by John Cleese, for example, you have Basil Fawlty, you have a lot of people reacting normally, and then this anomaly, this outside thing comes in, and you see what happens, how people react. And horror does exactly that thing. But in comedy, of course, it's supposed to create laughter, and in horror, it's supposed to create shivers. But the technique is basically the same: establish a normal reality and introduce something foreign into that and see what happens. So it's not as far apart as it might seem.
なるほど。コメディも同じなんていうか現実世界の中に異質のものが入ってくるっていうのはあまり考えたことがなかったけど、確かにその通りですね。もう一つその現実世界ということで言うと、モールスという作品を特に読んだ方はモールスの舞台がブラッケベリで、アイヴィデ・リンドクヴィストさんの出身もブラッケベリだということに気づかれた方も多いと思うんですけれども、でボーダーっていう短編集の方にもブラッケベリーが出てくる作品が結構ありますよね。でそれが一つのなんていうか現実の舞台としてすごく機能していて、その描写がとってもリアルなので、そこに恐ろしいものが現れるっていうのがまさに今おっしゃった普通の世界に異質なものが現れるっていうものをとても感じさせる作品なんですけれども、ブラッケベリットはどういう場所なのかっていうことを少し教えていただいてもいいですか？アイヴィデ・リンドクヴィストさんにとって一体どういう場所なんでしょう？
Yeah, well, it's where I grew up. So it's I can't really put any distance between myself and Blackeberg. It's just that place that most people who grow up in one place have. It's where I grew up. It's where my childhood's here. That's where I was created. And my first ever notes for Let the Right One In was even before I knew that there was going to be a vampire. My first note was just Blackeberg. Something scary comes there and we'll see what happens. And then just later on, I decided a vampire would be the best thing for it to come. But in later years, I've moved away every time, because Blackeberg is a suburb. It's not really a town. Every time when I want to portray people, because I portray a lot of people living in the suburbs or in small towns, Blackeberg is always the first place that springs to mind. But in the latest years, I can't really use Blackeberg all the time. So I've developed a relationship towards other suburbs of Stockholm. And I very often use imaginary places, so I myself can decide upon the geography what is needed for the story. But it's always Blackeberg that pops up first when I need a place, because I know exactly where every tree stands, where the parkways are, where you can walk, where the stores are, especially in the time when I grew up. And this is, I know there's even the people from all over the world, not a lot, but quite a few, who actually do these trips to Sweden, and they use Let the Right One In as a guidebook to walk around Blackeberg, because everything is portrayed exactly, at least as it looked in 1982. And a lot of that is still there. So, yeah.
なるほど、ありがとうございます。ブラッケベリーは本当にストックホルムの郊外の町で、なんというか計画的に住宅地として建てられた場所ですよね。そういうあまり歴史のない場所で、人間の、計画に従って作られた町っていうことで、そこにまた異質なものが現れるっていうのがかなりの効果を醸し出しているなと思うんですけれども、モールスの中にも完璧な街を作ろうとしたけど、どこかに歪みができて計画が狂ってみたいなことが書いてあって、とても面白いなと思いました。先ほどブラッケベリーに何か恐ろしいものがやってくる、何が起こるか見てみようっていうことをおっしゃったんですけれども、まずじゃあモールスがどういう物語なのか、ちょっともし読んでない方がいらっしゃったら そのためにちょっと紹介すると、さっきもちょっとお話しあったように、ヴァンパイアが来るんですよね。その恐ろしいものっていうのもね。でヴァンパイアであるエリという12歳の子供と、その父親らしき男がブラッケベリの団地に住む、オスカルという少年の隣に引っ越してきて、で、エリはヴァンパイアであるっていうことを知らないオスカルとエリの間に友情が育っていく。一方で、ブラッケベリの周辺では恐ろしい殺人事件が起こるという話ですね。で、まず、その恐ろしいものがヴァンパイアになるっていうのはどういうふうに出たんでしょう。その最初の着想が何かがブラッケベリに来るだったとしたら、それがヴァンパイアっていうのはどうして決めたんでしょうか。
Because I realized that you don't really need that much exposition for a vampire. You get a lot of mythology for free that comes with a vampire. And then you can play with that mythology. For example, the very first time Oscar sees Eli is when he's standing, he's bullied in school and is pretending to get back at his bullies by stabbing his knife into a tree, and then takes out the knife. And in the reflection of the blade of the knife, he sees Eli for the first time. So yeah, okay. Eli can be seen in vampire in mirrors. Eli is not repelled by garlic, for example. I mean, that's just silly. So I try to just take the traits of the vampire mythology that I would find most useful to portray a character and use them, because, and I also try to very much think about, okay, we have this was 2 years before Twilight and all that. I often get the question outside of Sweden, were you inspired by Twilight? And say, fuck, this book came out 2 years before Twilight. But anyhow, I try to take away all the glitter, take away all the romantic, take away all the counts in Transylvanian castles, take away, a lot of things, and just being a 12-year-old who has to kill and drink other people's blood to survive. What would this child's existence actually look like? It would be an extremely lonely, disgusting, horrifying existence. It would be like a child trying to live with a terrible disease that would impel this child to hurt other people, even though it doesn't really want to. So I try to just take the traits of vampirism that I thought would suit my story in the portrayal of a child who's having really a terrible life and finds some consolation and even eventually love by meeting someone at her own age, to actually have someone to play with, to be close to, which Ellie hasn't been for like hundreds of years. People are just trying to use Ellie for different purposes. And this is someone who actually connects with her on a human level. So for me, Let the Right One In, through all its violence and all that, it's most of all, it's a love story.
なるほど。私にとってこの作品を読んだ時に一番印象的だったのは、そのエリーがヴァンパイアでありながらすごくやっぱり子供なんですよね、今おっしゃったように。で、それはなんか小説が進むにつれてだんだんオスカルと友情を育むにつれて出てくることで、根本的にはやっぱりすごく孤独で、でもなんか友達が欲しいっていうとても基本的な願いがそこにあって、そういうヴァンパイアの描き方をしている作品をあんまり知らなかったので、とても新鮮に感じられました。あとちょっと思ったのが、先ほどヴァンパイアの設定は大体皆さんが知っているものなので使いやすかったということをおっしゃってましたけれども、この小説多分その舞台設定がリアルだからなのか、そのオスカルの人物像がリアルだからなのか、その全くリアルな世界の中にヴァンパイアが来たせいか、読んでいて、なんかヴァンパイアって本当に日の光に当たるとダメなんだなとか、ヴァンパイアって本当にそうなんだなっていう、なんかすごく妙な感想を抱いたんですね。でも 従来の設定とは違うところもありますよね。例えばちょっとネタバレになっちゃうかもしれないんですけど、エリーは棺の中で寝てはいないんですよね。例えば。あと先ほどのように人間らしいところとかもあり、そういうところをどういうふうに設定を組み立てていったのかなっていうところに少し興味があります。最初は何が決まっていて、でだんだんそれが変わっていったのか、それとも最初から全部そういう設定を先に考えて、でそこから物語を組み立てていったのか、どういうプロセスでそのエリーっていうキャラクターが築き上げられていったのかお話しいただけますか？
Yeah, first of all, Oscar is very much a self-portrait. I mean, for me, I was bullied in school, and I think Ellie is like a projection or a dream fantasy, that friend that I would like to have had, this supernatural helper when I myself was at that age. And Oscar lives in the exact same apartment where I grew up. Which means that when my mother still lived, also these Americans would come and take pictures of her bedroom window. Because it's very easy to recognize in the book exactly which apartment Oscar lives in. But with Alice, it's like I said, that I wanted to take this vampire thing seriously. That if you actually had to live with this affliction that vampirism would be, how would that life actually look like? And but Ellie is still, I think he's I want to, spoil the book, is almost 400 years old, and there's like a key scene in the book and in the movie where Oscar is starting to suspect that something is actually very, very wrong with Ellie, that Ellie is not what he expects. So he asks how old are you really? And Ellie replies, I'm 12, but I've been that for a very long time. So I had to develop a mythology where this would be possible, where Ellie, hibernates for long periods. And when Ellie wakes up again, it's like all the memories or experiences in the last, year, whatever, half year, is erased, and Ellie is back to being 12 years old. So there is a sadness or a heaviness or a loneliness, that's age old, that's ancient, residing inside Ellie. Like I said somewhere, it's like an old person sitting inside Ellie's head, looking out through Ellie's eyes, but still in most important traits, Ellie is still a 12-year-old, but with a heavy heart and with the faint memories of having previous experiences. And that was very, very important when I wrote this book. It's very much my wife's doing. These scenes where Oscar and Ellie meet for the first time in the playground. In the beginning, when I wrote this book, Ellie was very much more a supernatural, powerful, beautiful creature. And I read this to my wife and she said, no, this is not working. Why would Ellie be interested in Oscar? And I rewrote it and I read it aloud to her. And she said, no, it's like a childhood fantasy. Why would Ellie? And I went back and rewrote it. And for each time I made Ellie less and less and less and less powerful, back to this person who can't really speak properly, smells because Ellie doesn't wash a lot, and is quite insecure about how to interact with people. And eventually I got them to a level, and I understood this, that okay, so Ellie has found a playmate for the first time in a very, very long time, and there is a slight attraction from Ellie's side, that is to actually get close to a human on a human level. So it was a process of degrading Ellie more and more down to Oscar's level, where they could actually, in a realistic way, meet.
なるほど、面白いです。印象的なシーンの一つに、エリーがルービックキューブをオスカルから借りてやるところがありますよね。あれは本当に私も80年代に子供時代を過ごしたものとしてすごく懐かしいアイテムだったんですけれども、もう一つパズルとして卵の形のパズル、すごく細かいピースからできた卵型をしたパズルみたいなのが出てきて、で、それがエリーの家にあって、すごく難しそうなパズルなので、それを一人きりで解いていくほどの時間があったのなっていうことで、すごくエリーの孤独が伝わってくるアイテムだと思うんですけれども、卵型っていうのには何かあれは何かインスピレーションの元とかがあったんですかね？それとも
Yeah, I want to do two things with that egg because first of all, actually the Rubik's Cube came in quite late in the story, and I had to go back and put it in there when I realized that this is a brilliant way for them to connect, that Oscar has this Rubik's Cube, and there's a lot of connection. There is for those who are aware of Hellraiser, there is this Le Marchand's puzzle box, and this I wanted to make in a much mundane, realistic context. So the Rubik's Cube is basically the Le Marchand box, but in a contemporary society. And the egg it's the inspiration was the Fabergé eggs, the Russian emperor. It was to show that Eli is, just haphazardly, by coincidence, because of a lie, Eli is in possession of things that are extremely valuable. Because these Fabergé eggs, they sell for millions and millions. I don't know if it's a book in the film, but Eli says that you could sell that and buy a nuclear power plant. That's probably not true. The Fabergé eggs are quite that expensive, but it was to show also that Eli has a back history that also implies that she has at some point been in the possession of extreme riches, but now they are all gone. It's just a way to show the randomness of Eli's existence, and of course it's also a puzzle made out. I mean, it's like in the book. Oscar, thinks, oh, my God, how much time it must take to assemble this puzzle again once it's taken aside. So it's also to show all the time Eli has, the loneliness. Like you say, it's completely right what you say. It's also supposed to symbolize Eli's loneliness, this all these little puzzles.
なるほど。孤独っていうのはすごくキーワードですよね。この小説でもう一つ印象的だったのは、ヴァンパイアになってしまう登場人物がいますよね。ちょっとなるべくネタバレしないように話すと、大人で一人ヴァンパイアに感染してしまうというか、なってしまう人物がいて、でその人の反応を見ると、やっぱり子供とか孫とかもいて、愛する人もいて、でそういう人たちと自分が全く違う存在になってしまうっていうことをすごく恐れるっていう反応が出てきたのが印象的でした。でエリーにももちろんそれはあったんだろうけど、なんか子供だったからやっていけたのかなっていうか、子供ならではのなんていうか、まだ世界への愛着みたいのが少なくて、でだからこそ大変な孤独ではあるけれども、ずっとヴァンパイアとして生きてこられたのかな。それはもしかしたら大人にはできないことなのかなってちょっと思ったんですよね。でオスカルももしかして自分がヴァンパイアになったんじゃないかって恐れる場面がありますけど、なんかその恐れの度合いがやっぱり大人とは全然違うというか、そういう印象を受けて、で子供とこういう異質なものっていうか、何かこの世界のものではないものっていうのは、もしかして親和性が高いというか、子供の方が影響を受けやすいというか、そういう面があるのかなと少し考えました。でアイヴィデ・リンドクヴィストさんの作品には子供や若者が出てくることが結構多くて、そういうなんていうんだろう、子供ならではの危うさみたいな、別の世界のものを受け入れやすい、受け入れがち、受け入れる素地があるみたいな、そういう存在として子供を描かれているのかなと。そのあたりについてどう思われるかお聞きできますか？それとも本当に偶然子供や若者が多いっていうのはただの偶然なんでしょうか？
No, it's not a coincidence. I will soon get into that. But yeah, this character that's starting to become a vampire. It's funny because one of my favorite scenes in the book is where this person is, of course, you react in an adult way. You don't want to go out and kill other people. So I say this person all the time, not have to spoil. That's the first thing this person is trying to drink its own blood. Its own blood. It's hard to not use a pronoun, but it disgusts this person that this person. It's so awkward, that she has she, as fuck I'm saying she, that she has to go out and kill other people, so she tries to drink her own blood. And this was excluded, this scene from the Swedish movie, because Thomas Alfredson didn't feel that it really fitted anywhere. And then that was the only thing when me and Matt Reeves, who did the American version, I asked him, okay, I'm sure you will do a great job, but please, can you include this scene that wasn't in the Swedish movie? And actually he did. It wasn't quite as long as in the, but she tries to drink her own blood in one scene. So yeah, thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, but children, yes. Yeah, I use that a lot because I'm maybe I'm childish myself, but I love writing children's dialogue and how children think. I don't know, I feel a very strong affinity with myself in that age from Let the Right One In and onwards. But also, for one thing, children are, you probably read a book called I Am Behind You, maybe, when you read my working English, I don't know. But there is a very scary little child called Molly there. She's a horrible little girl, looks like a princess with long blonde hair, and that's how a Swedish princess would look at least. And she's evil incarnate. And there's of course something extremely creepy with children being evil. That's normal. But when I have children as protagonists or young people, this is because I like to portray people, especially in regards to the supernatural, people whose identity are yet not formed. So there's one thing with children and young. It's that if we adults see someone, with blood running down their face or coming down the street, we look for the cameras. Where okay, what are they shooting here? And a child would think, my God, a zombie. So there must, they have much easier to believe that they don't really know. There is a certain point we still don't know where are the borders between what's natural and what's supernatural. You don't really know how the world works. So you're much more apt to accept the existence of the supernatural. And also in an age, I tend to portray children and people who have failed in life, who don't really have a fixed purpose in life. And this is because their identity are still not formed, and the whispers from the other side or the supernatural is still like a possibility. It's which it really absolutely is for Oscar. It's a possibility of something else. And and why I portray a lot of has-been people whose identity, for example, has been very tightly together with their work, what they work with, and then this work for somehow disappears, and they're left with nothing. And then the whispers from the other side become more, this is a possibility. This is a possibility to transcend my mundane existence into something else, often with horrible consequences. But still the possibility of elevating yourself, becoming something more, transcend that the whispers from the other side can give you. Because if you have a perfect life, nice husband, wife, work, children, you're happy. Why would you listen to those whispers? You would just But if your identity still isn't fixed, or if you have lost your identity as an adult, then these whispers become very attractive.
なるほど、アイデンティティの揺らぎっていうのは確かにキーワードかもしれないですね。今お話聞いててちょっと思ったのが、短編集のボーダー2つの世界の方に一つホラー色のあんまりない作品があって、マイケンっていう作品ですけれども、ある意味社会から切り離された、ある意味捨てられたように感じている年配の女性が主人公で、そこにホラー的なささやきではないけど外からのささやきが来て、で思いがけないことが起こるっていう、でもとても今お話聞いていて根本は同じなんだなっていうふうに思いました。で、最初に聞いたコメディとホラーの境界線は実はそんなに大きくないっていうお話にもでもつながるものを感じました。マイケンは結構ちょっとコメディ色のある作品ですよね。とても短編集の中でも大好きな作品で。で、ちょっと今映画化の話があったのでそっちにお話を少し持っていこうかなと思うんですけど、なんか気がついたら時間が結構あっという間に過ぎつつあるので、一つ言い忘れたことが、 お聞きになっている方で質問がありましたら Q&A に書くことができます。で、後でまとめて読んでお聞きするようにしようと思いますので、最後その時間も取らなきゃいけないからちょっと先に進みますね。で、映画化の話が出たので伺いたいんですけど、結構映画のシナリオも書かれていますよね。で、振り返ると長編小説も書かれて短編も書かれて、でシナリオも書かれて、で戯曲とかもあるんですけど、そういう時の、執筆のプロセスは結構ジャンルによって違うものなんでしょうか。先ほどモールスの着想のところで、ブラックベリーにその恐ろしいものがやってくるって、何が起こるか見てみようっていうことをおっしゃっていて、そうなると最初からこう全部シノプシスを全部組み立ててから書き始めるタイプではないのかなと思ったんですけれども、長編と短編とではやっぱりまた組み立て方が違いますよね。どっちの方が好きですか？シナリオの書くときにはまた小説とは違うプロセスをたどるものでしょうか？
There's a lot of questions there. First of all, very happy that you like Maiken. It's my second favorite from Paper Walls. I think Border, I think, is still the best short story I've ever written, but I really, really like Maiken also. This was made into a 1-hour movie for Swedish television, by the way. But this is, I was also a very enthusiastic shoplifter in my youth. So it's based on that also, in the time when I was unhappy, like Oscar. So the process of writing things, yeah. It's all different. I mean, a short story just requires basically one or two ideas. And I'm most happy when I have these two, it's usually two ideas different that I have that come together. And I feel, there's the story. And then I write it just in 2, 3, 4 days, 20, 30 page short story. That's just fun. Writing a novel is a very different thing. They need 9 ideas. But I have all these images floating around. And for me, writing novels is basically that I have a lot of strong images, and making a novel out of it, it's just constructing pathways between these images. That's where the thinking comes in. I've said somewhere that for me, writing novels is like, I have a lot of pictures, a lot of paintings that I'm happy with. And writing a novel is like building a house to protect these paintings. But that can be quite a long process, and I know I don't write synopsises because I'm shitty. I'm really bad at it. I need to write to know what's going to happen. I have vague ideas about how it's going to end, and I make, I write. I ask myself a lot of questions, make notes. Why is it like this? What will happen then? Where did that come from? Okay, what's she like? And then maybe after I planned, then I can write maybe 20 pages, and then things happen while I write these pages that makes, so I have to go back to the notes and okay, so that happened, and now I have to change the story like that. So I very much write like a reader, especially when we are abroad. We try to go to Cuba for 2 months, my wife and I, each year, and there I can write 10, 12, 14 pages in one day. So I just write, and it's almost like I write like I'm reading what's going to happen next. And I'm, like a reader, I want to be entertained. I want, to turn to the next page to see what happens. And I write like that. And so, and it can be very unplanned. I can have a note that's in 3 lines, what's going to happen. And this becomes 12 pages, these 3 lines, when people start talking and what happens between them. So it's partly a process of having enough ideas, and then just letting, like Stephen King says, the boys in the basement do their work and make it happen. But without those images, I would have nothing. Theater is a different thing. I've written a few plays, and this is often together with the director and also the ensemble, that we discuss as we go along. Does this scene work? No, I would need something more of this character here. Okay, so I go back and I try to write that, and we go back on the floor and try it out. And yeah, it's a different process, and it's the only one where I really work together with other people, which is fun to do every now and then. And then the scenarios for the movies. It's where the difficult thing there is, I've written most of the things I've written for cinema. I've written, based on my own stuff. There's one exception, The Brothers Lionheart by Astrid Lindgren, which me and Thomas Alfredson were supposed to do, but there you have to. The difficult thing is that I use a lot of, in my novels, I use a lot of in a monologue. People, think about what they are doing, who they are, why they are, where they are heading in life, blah, blah. And this, of course, cannot be done on the screen. I don't want voiceovers. Nobody wants that. So I have to, subtract this from their minds and make it into some kind of action, something that shows their character in what they do or what they say. And this translation can sometimes be quite difficult to come up with. But that's the thing, to take out the inner workings and making into outer workings when you're writing a screenplay. And it's a different process.
なるほど、すごくありがとうございます。とても面白かったです。ちょっと話戻っちゃうんですけど、小説の方にその後ろの壁のメモがいっぱい貼ってあるのは、それも執筆プロセスの表れですか？どういう次の作品の
It's for I have one novel that's finished coming out this spring, one that's almost finished that's coming out next autumn probably, and then I have a collection of short stories that's finished. Then I'm going to write this. I've written like 40-50 pages on it. It's called The Value, and it's normally I don't do this post-it thing, but the thing is that the structure of this novel is so extremely complicated, where you jump backwards and forwards in time, and the question is not as much what's going to happen as how did it come to this? How did this happen? And then, some pages later, you jump back in time to see, okay, so that's why it became like that. It's completely inspired by a Japanese video game called Forbidden Siren, which works exactly like that. Yeah, so that's in the future.
楽しみですね。作品にゲーム結構登場しますよね。
Yeah, no, you won't. Yeah.
今のゲームの着想もありましたけど、ちょっとご紹介したアンソロジーに入ってる短編のキーパーコンパニオンという作品は
Sorry, because we're with the Japanese audience now. I'm a big Nintendo fan, and we've been playing Pokemon Go, the trading card game, forever. Me and my wife and our son, since he was 5 or something, and now me and my wife play Pokemon Go together. We're at level 41 now. We're very proud of that. So I have a strong relation with video games, and especially with Nintendo. Just have to mention that.
そうですよね。ポケモン GO すごい最新作の、先ほどちょっとお話あったかもしれないんですけど、The Kindness っていう優しさっていう今年の、初めに出た本で、ポケモン GO すごく重要な役割を果たしますよね。
Yes, and Nintendo as the games also, as Wind Waker and Mario Kart and all this. You might even suspect that I've been sponsored by Nintendo because there's so much Nintendo in that book, but no, I haven't.
本当ですね。そうですね。そうでした。ごめんなさい。ボーダーの話をちょっとしようかなと思います。時間なくなってきたので、さっきもちょっとお話あったんですけど、ボーダーすごく私も好きな作品で、さっきモールスの最初の着想がその恐ろしいものがブラックベリーにやってくるっていうことだったというお話があったんですけど、ボーダーはね、なんか主人公が税関の職員で、人が隠し事をしているとこう匂いでそれを嗅ぎ分けられるんですよね。で、そういう特殊能力を持っていて、でそのティーナという主人公がある日税関に現れた、ボーレという不思議な男に出会って、ボーレは明らかに隠し事をしている匂いがするんだけど、何も見つからないっていうところから始まる短編で、もうこの設定からして、この税関職員が隠し事を嗅ぎ分けられるっていう設定からしてすごいなって思って、とても好きな作品なんですけれども、これの最初の着想は何だったんでしょうか。もしかしてその人の嘘を嗅ぎ分けられるっていうのが最初でしたか。
there were two different ideas colliding, and this will be minor spoiler, but I had two, as I said before, when writing a short story, and this is a long short story, you need basically two ideas that you combine. And the first one was that I started thinking about trolls, because in the Swedish mythology of trolls, what trolls do, their main trait, the one I was interested in, was that this was a way in the older Sweden to explain why a child was, misshaped, deformed, why something happened to a child that, something became wrong with it. It was that a troll had taken the child and exchanged it with one of their own. So now it was a troll child that you had at home. And what were you going to do with that? And I started thinking of, in a modern context, this is an old, many hundred years ago, but in a modern context, if trolls existed, and they did this still, why do they do it? And how would they go about doing it? So, and then I used other parts of the troll mythology, that they're afraid of lightning and so on. Yeah, that was one part that I became interested in. How could you portray a troll realistically? Like Ellie in Let's Write One In. How could this actually be? And then we went on a ferry here. We live very close to a port here. And when we came back from the trip, we passed these custom officers who they stand there and they look, and you always get nervous. You don't have anything, even if you don't have anything to hide, you still get nervous. Anything, do I look suspicious? Is there something wrong with me? Ooh. And I got the idea, okay, let's imagine there was a custom officers who could actually, with 100% certainty, see if someone was hiding something. And then I combined these ideas and voila, border.
なるほど。本当に映画化もとても良かったですね。特殊メイクがアカデミー賞を取ったりした映画ですけれども、これ本当この話をネタバレせずに語るのはとても難しいので、もうしょうがないかなと思いますけども、映画化された方は結構原作とは違う内容になってますよね。原作の短編にはなかったサイドストーリーが入っていて、で終わり方も違うし、そのティーナとボーレの関係も違う形で終わりますよね。これはどうしてそういうふうになったんでしょうか。ご自身で、あるいは映画は他の方との共同作業だと思うので、他の方々がこの短編の内容そのままでは映画としてうまくいかないっていう判断をされたんでしょうか。それともむしろ短編で書ききれなかったことを映画でやったっていう感じなんでしょうか。
Yeah, no, there's a very simple answer to that. But because you said in the beginning that I wrote the script, it wasn't just me. There were two other, Isabella Eklöf and Ali Abbasi, the director. They were also participating in the script. And I just wrote the two first versions of the script, which didn't include the side plot at all, with the police and the pedophiles and all that. It wasn't at all in my script, as it isn't in the story. It was much more concentrated on the relationship between Tina and Vore. But then they felt they needed to add another layer, and with the Vore's background and so on. And I'm not sure that this is completely successful in the movie, but maybe they were right. I mean, the movie was a success. People were very, very happy with it in Cannes, but I didn't make those changes. On the other hand, the ending, which I won't give away, wasn't mine. The rewritten ending wasn't mine either, but I think that's a better ending than the one I had. So that's good. I think it's a very, very nice ending. But the big changes in the story weren't made by me. So it's maybe the finished movie. Maybe 50% of what I originally wrote is in the movie. The rest is by the other screenwriters.
なるほど。エンディングに関しては確かにとても印象的なエンディングだったんですけど、すごく正直なこと言っていいですか？短編の原作を読んだ時にも思ったし、映画を見ても思ったんですけど、小説とかあらゆる現実の反映として読む必要は全然ないと思うんですけれども、 どうしてもこのマジョリティっていうか、その普通の人間とは違う生活様式を持ったトロールっていう種族をこう人間が弾圧というか抑圧している構図に、やっぱり現実にこのスウェーデンだったら先住民族のサーミーの人々とか、あとはロマーの方々とかをマジョリティの生活様式とは違うっていう形で抑圧してきた歴史をどうしてもなんかちょっと思い出してしまうところがあって、そう考えると映画のエンディングって結構人間に都合いいなって思ったんですよね。人間に優しいというか、ティーナはあれだけのことをされたらもっと怒ってもいいんじゃないのかなってちょっと思ったりもしました。なんかそういう現実のサーミーとかに対する歴史的な抑圧とか、そういうことはこの作品を書いたときに頭にあったことですか？それとも私が完全に見当違いな感想を抱いているんでしょうか？
Yeah, it's very impressive that you know about these things. Yeah, it occurred to me while writing the story, but it's not a parable about the how Sweden has treated the Sami people. It's not, but it's inevitable that this association comes up with the Romani people, like you say. But this is why usually I think that this is why an idea for a story attracts me, and I don't speculate on this or try to make it like a parable or a metaphor for something else. But if I have a good image, like this with the troll, for example, and I feel this has other levels. This can be interpreted in other ways. This has a kind of depth or heaviness to it. And if I just write this as truthfully as I can, it will mean other things also. And this is the case with Border and the trolls, that I was aware of this while writing this, that this could be seen as a metaphor for something else, but I don't really have that in mind while writing it. I just write about trolls.
なるほど。ありがとうございます。そうですね。なんか
It's the same thing, actually. My second novel, Handling the Undead, which is a zombie novel where the zombies are not aggressive. It's just dead people coming back to life. And they get like incarcerated in like almost a concentration camp where they are completely excluded from society because they are dead. And also when this came out, people asked, is this a metaphor of how people are treating immigrants or people come from other countries, how we detain them in camps and so on. And I said, because this is true, no, it's about zombies. That's it.
なるほど。その作品のお話が出たので、でもちょっと説明すると、私もとても好きな作品ですけれども、ある日突然こう亡くなった人が生き返るというか、ゾンビとして蘇るんですよね。ただ面白いのが、そのゾンビは決して人間に対して攻撃的ではなくて、むしろ人間の側の精神状態とかをこう反映する存在というような設定になっていますよね。で、ゾンビの恐ろしさというより、ゾンビの登場に対して社会がどう反応するかっていうところがすごく面白く描かれている作品で、先ほど収容所っていうお話もあったんですけど、そのゾンビをこう収容所に隔離して、でそこに面会に行ったりするんですよね、その人間が。でそれで何が起こるかっていう物語もあって、とてもこれもやっぱりモールスの時と同じで、ヴァンパイアの設定がとても新鮮だなと思ったのと、この作品も同じようにゾンビの設定がとても新鮮だなと思いながら読んだ作品でした。まだ大丈夫ですかね。もし質問がありましたら、ぜひお書きください。その間にもう一つ、ちょっとじゃあ伺ってみたいと思いますけど、これモールスの話してた時にちょっと聞きたいなと思ってたんですが、 ヴァンパイアの恐ろしさって、ごめんなさい、話が前後して。私、この作品を、モールスをずっと前に一度読んで、で、今回、このインタビューをさせていただくっていうことが決まって、また読み返したんですね。で、読み返したときに、それはコロナパンデミックの、最中であり、終わりかけている、最近のことだったので、なんかヴァンパイアの恐ろしさって感染症の恐ろしさにちょっと似ているなって思って、やっぱり単純にこう感染するものなので、それが本能的に恐ろしいっていうのがあるなと思って、前に読んだ時はそんなこと考えなかったので、読み返した時に面白いなと思ったんですけれども、このパンデミックで何かこのパンデミックの間は何をされてましたか？作品を執筆されていたのだろうとは思うんですけれども、どんなことを考えて、何かこう考えとか世界観といったら大きいのかもしれないんですけど、変わったというようなことはありましたか？
Well, I have a very boring answer to that question. You know, my life looked exactly the same, more or less. As you probably know, the Swedish restrictions weren't very heavy, but we didn't have to wear, these masks for a very long time, and me and my wife, we are quite isolated as it is. I mean, we sit here and we have each our little cabin outside of our house where we can go to sit and work in the days. We don't meet a lot of people. We don't really, we couldn't go to the movies anymore, which we usually do once a week. We're going to see the new James Bond movie tomorrow, for example. But apart from that, life didn't really change at all. We could just go on with our daily routines. And it's just that we have a large family and people would have to be quarantined for a week before coming here, because my wife is quite a few years older than I. So, but that's that. It didn't affect me very much. I got a lot of work done.
なるほど、仕事ははかどりますよね、確かにね。そう思います、私も翻訳者として。これからの世界で、このコロナパンデミックで結構根本的な安心感とか、そういったものが失われたと感じている人多いと思いますし、気候変動とかね、それで特に若い人はこれからこう地球がどうなってしまうんだろうっていう不安を抱いていたりして、ある意味ご本人が最初におっしゃった普通の世界に異質なものが入ってくるのがホラー小説だとしたら、その普通の世界が今ちょっと揺らぎつつある、あまり安定したものではなくなってきていると思うし、そう感じている人が多いのかなという印象なんですが、これからの世界で人は何を怖がると思われますか？もう現実がすでに十分怖いんじゃないかというか、次に書かれる怪物はどんな怪物になるのか。
The next thing, the one that's a sort of a monster. It's a book coming out in the spring. Well, we have a book coming out in 1 week. One of my wife about birds, but that's another thing. No, one that I finished some time ago is called Reality, Verkligheten, and that's about this reality show about a family that has a famous Swedish family that has a reality show where the woman in the family, who is the protagonist, starts to lose grip on reality and what is real and what is not. And this is a short novel, just 180 pages or something, which I wrote in 5 weeks in a burst of inspiration. So it's very fresh and direct. I'm really fond of it. That's my next monster, and that there will be sometime in the future. This is on my wall. It's not about that, but there is a story called my next novel after this, which is called We Played Here. This is about climate change, where there's a small island in Sweden where the water level has risen like 2 or 3 meters. It's set in the future, And this house is just the only thing standing above water on this island, and there are workers coming there to lift the house so it comes out of the water. And there's this person, the main character, who comes back to the house and remembers his childhood when the island still existed, but there are also ghosts from the past in this house. And yeah, that was in some way deal with climate change, because there will be flashbacks to this time when the ghosts were created that plagues him in the 2050s. So it's also like it's kind of a metaphor for, you know, things that change. Yeah.
すごく楽しみです。それとても読みたいです。まだ質問はまだないのかな？ありますかね。そしたらもう一つ、もう一つというか、最近ちょっとちょこちょこお話に出ている、新作についてお聞きしたいと思うのですが、これじゃないですね。これだ。ちょっと文字切れてたらごめんなさい。今年の初めに出たこの、Vänligheten, the kindness、優しさ、フレンドリーさみたいな意味ですけれども、この本、そう分厚いんですよ。私も持ってるんですけど、ご本人に見せていただいた方がいいですね。これ、本当余裕で立つ本で700ページ以上、720ページとかありますよね。で、この本はあまりこうまずヴァンパイアのような具体的な怪物が出てくるっていうよりは、もっとなんか抽象的な怪物ですよね。で、ある地方の町に黄色いコンテナが流れ着いて、で鍵がかかっていて開けられないんだけど、誰もその中身を知らなくて、でついに開けたら何かこう得体の知らないものが出てきたっていう話で、結構この怪物今本当にここにいるんじゃないのって思うような作品でした。ちょっとこの作品についてどんなことを考えて執筆されたかとかお話しいただけますか？
That is such a long story. This is really the first ideas for this I had ages ago. Also, this is not a suburb. This is our closest town, Norrtälje, which is like 25 kilometers from here, a small town, which I wanted to portray. That was one of my ambitions with this book, to make a very detailed portrayal of Norrtälje, which is more or less unrepresented in Swedish literature. So I want to write a big book where Norrtälje was like a character in the book. But this is the first novel I've written that didn't come with these images first, or these things that I needed to write, but it came with the characters that I saw, you know, like 15 years ago. I saw on a very hot Swedish summer day, where it's completely mini golf. You know mini golf? Yeah, a mini golf grounds where it's completely empty, apart from three men between 25 and 30 who weren't really you could see in their postures and the clothes, they weren't really successful in life. It looked quite, you know, dreary being on a mini golf court in the middle of summer, you know, where everyone is away. But as they stood there and they played, and they made little jokes to each other, and they tapped each other on the shoulder, made little jokes, and I felt like, okay, fuck, this existence works also. You know, they have each other. You know, you don't really have to be that successful as long as you have someone else and you have something together. And then another day I was at the gym, and I saw two very overweight girls or young women in the same age as the boys or men, who were going in pair, helping each other out in the machines. And of course, because they were so overweight, doing this is, you know, really, really difficult. But one was in the machine and the other one was standing next to it. Yeah, come on, you can do this. You're so good. Yeah, you can. Wow, yeah, you're so strong. And the other one, yeah. And I thought, okay, fuck, they're doing great. You know, they have each other. It'll work out. And I thought, okay, one day I'll write a story where I take these three men and these two women, and let them get together and see what happens. So that was the basic idea. Then I had, of course, a lot of others that had with this. I had this image of this bright yellow container suddenly standing in the port of Norrtälje. It just comes there one night. Nobody knows how it came there. Nobody knows what it contains. And when it opens, it's the monster in this novel is not a monster. It's fear itself. The concept of the abstract concept of fear is the monster. And what this does to Norrtälje when it starts to simmer or infiltrate Norrtälje, the fear as an abstract concept. Yeah.
そのコンセプトがとても面白い作品だと思いました。今質問ではないんですけど、メッセージというか、これ英語で書かれているので、私読んじゃっても大丈夫ですかね。一応読みますね。Sorry, not a question, but a big thank you for the talk. Especially enlightening us about the similarity between comedy and horror stories, and of course, with magic. Best wishes.
Not much of a question there, but thank you. Thank you.
もう一つ入ってきましたけど、これも英語で書かれているのですが、私が読んでも大丈夫ですか？I think you are really good at depicting outcast people, alcoholics, pedophiles, etc. Reading your description, I start feeling like I really understand them, including the kid who does shoplifting and who starts planning to kill the bullies, and why the bullies need to bully. I think this is a strength of yours as a writer. What do you think makes you good at writing these people?
You have to repeat the end. What was the question?
聞こえましたか？大丈夫ですか
Oh, well, I've been there myself. I was shoplifting. I was, like Morrissey said, I had this quote in one of my books. I was a small fat child in a welfare house. There was only one thing I ever dreamed about. Fate has just handed it to me. Whoopee. Well, this is how I grew up. Now I'm like middle-class intellectual, but I couldn't write about middle-class and intellectual because I don't really know how it feels to be what I am. I know all about the practical details and so on, but how in that way, I'm someone who works in a grocery store and has an alcohol problem, brews his own beer and get drunk in the weekend and has a dog who's sick and he can't pay for the operation. This, I know how it feels. The details I have to make up, but I know how it feels to be. I mean, I was, I had some success in later years, but me and my wife were quite really poor, like 20 years ago. So this is the life that formed me, and I grew up with my mother in a small apartment in the suburb, and also my mother and my father went apart when I was just a few months old. And I spent some time with my father also in the Swedish archipelago, and this tends to come back every now and then in my stories. I simply follow the basic writer's rule: write what you know, and this is what I know.
なるほど、ありがとうございます。ちょっと質問がいろいろ出てきたので嬉しいですね。読みますね。時事解釈について質問です。水に沈むというと震災時の津波を思い出してそれだけで怖いですが、怪物も登場するのですか？ネタバレでなければ教えてください。
This is my thing. In books, I think this will be my next book. So it's there's a lot of things that's not clear to me there. I don't know. I wrote a novel called Harbor, where the sea in itself is the monster. It's a thinking organism. And I think I might hark back a little bit to that mythology here, but this will basically be, I think, a ghost story. It's about it will be very much about this person longing or remembering, being melancholic or nostalgic about his childhood. Could be a she, I don't know, and all the things that are disappear in a person's life, all the things you love when you get old, how they disappear one by one. And this is somehow symbolized by the ocean being risen and, you know, eating up this whole island, eating away this person's memories. So it's I think it will be, I want to write, I want to become a little older before I write this, because I think it's very, this story will be very much about the melancholy, about growing old and how the things you love disappear. So I think I will need to be some years older before I write this, actually. But it's ghosts as melancholy presences.
ありがとうございます。もう一つ、見ている方からの質問で、どんな時に執筆のインスピレーションが湧いてきますかというご質問が来ています。
This is, I mean, there's a Swedish author famous for saying inspiration is for amateurs. But I don't really feel that. I mean, these basic images that I told you about that before that comes to me, they just come. I don't know where they come from. It's quite often when I drive, quite often when I shower, quite often when I'm sitting on the roof of our boat in the summer. We go a lot out in the archipelago. We have an old, you know, that kind of boat, and I'm steering and I'm sitting on the roof with my foot on the rudder. And I just sit there, and it could take an hour, you know, just sit there and steer the boat. And, you know, the thoughts just go by because I have really nothing else to do than steering the boat. And then images can pop up. Like, for example, this with the yellow container. I remember very clearly sitting there and we were out in the archipelago, and I just suddenly this yellow container just appeared in my head, and I said, fuck, what's that? What does it contain? What kind of story could this be? It's always completely unexpected when these basic images come. Then I have to sit down on my desk and ask myself, what do these images mean, and how can I use them? And this is the work. But the basic images very often just come.
なるほど、ありがとうございます。黄色いコンテナが先ほどお話しした優しさっていう本のキーになる、鍵となる要素ですよね。そろそろ時間でしょうか、もしかして。だとしたらここで切りますが、いかがですか？もう質問は大丈夫ですか、皆さん。大丈夫そうですね。そしたら、
はい。
さんに
どうもありがとうございました。とても、
映像が、
はい、どうもありがとうございました。とても貴重なお話を聞かせていただきました。
Thank you so much for your very good analysis and your good questions. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
はい。アイヴィデ・リンクイスさんは本当に奥深い作家だなと、改めて、思ったんですけど、まだ読んだことない作品がたくさんあるので、今度どれにしようかなって、ちょっとワクワクしながらお話を聞かせていただきました。個人的には優しさが、にすごい興味があります。それでは、ヨンさん、美穂さん、そしてご覧になっている皆様、今日は、誠にありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
バイバイ。
Tack så mycket.
Bye bye.
Bye. Hej då.